Anthony, on the right, holding the dark blue umbrella, and his friends, Jonathan, Kim, and Maria, are excited. You see, Anthony's grandfather Giuliani has almost finished a project the children have been keeping track of for almost a year now, so they're eager to see it. And there it is, a model ship. Grandpa Giuliani is famous for his model ships in Little Italy, a neighborhood in Chicago, Illinois, where many Italian Americans live. Many of Grandpa Giuliani's ships are in the Giuliani family business, a restaurant in Little Italy.
Have you thought of a name for it yet?
Oh, I've known its name for a long time. It's the Santa Maria, one of Christopher Columbus's ships.
I know who Christopher Columbus was. He discovered America.
Well, that's what a lot of people say, but Columbus wasn't the first person in America. Native Americans came to North America, that's the part of the world where we live, thousands of years before Columbus. They came from a part of the world we call Asia. Not only that, a famous Viking explorer, Leif Erikson, sailed across the ocean and reached North America about 500 years before Christopher Columbus did. But even though Columbus didn't really discover America, he's still one of the most important explorers of all time, and his story is very interesting.
When Christopher Columbus was alive, people knew much less about the world than we do today. He lived in Genoa, a city in Italy, some 550 years ago. Genoa was next to the sea, and young Christopher spent a lot of time watching ships sail in and out of its harbor. He loved the sea and sailing, and when he was only a teenager, took his first job on a ship. He was a very good sailor, and in time became a captain, a person in charge of a ship and its sailors. Columbus traveled far and wide as a sea captain. His ships carried goods, such as cloth and metal, to many countries. Once, his ship was attacked by pirates off the coast of Portugal. It sank, but Christopher was able to swim ashore. He liked Portugal and decided to make it his home. He met a beautiful noblewoman there, married her, and had a son, whom they named Diego. But Columbus still sailed ships across the seas. As you can imagine, he learned many different things on his journeys. One thing Columbus learned was how the explorer Marco Polo traveled over land to China. Marco Polo's travels gave Columbus an idea of how big the earth was and how he could reach China by sailing west over the ocean. He tried to convince the King of Portugal to give him money for ships and supplies for the journey, but the king couldn't make up his mind. Columbus waited for years and years for the money. Finally, the King of Portugal said no. His advisors had convinced him that Columbus couldn't get to China by sailing westward. The ocean, they said, was too big. But Christopher Columbus didn't give up. He went to Spain to try to get money for his journey from Ferdinand and Isabella, the king and queen of that country. When he was in Spain, Columbus and his sons stayed with some priests. Columbus's wife had died several years earlier. One of the priests knew the king and queen, and he told them about Columbus's plan. Queen Isabella liked the plan, but she said there wasn't enough money for the voyage. Spain was at war at the time, and much of its money had to go for soldiers and for their ships, food, tents, and weapons. The war lasted 6 more years. But Columbus still didn't give up his dream. Most other people would have, but not him. Finally, his patience was rewarded. When the war ended, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand gave him the ships and supplies he needed. And on a summer day in 1492, Christopher Columbus began his journey. He had 3 ships, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, and the Nina. It took more than a month to cross the ocean, and as the days passed into weeks, the sailors became more and more fearful. Some thought giant sea monsters would swallow them up. Others were afraid that since the winds always seemed to blow away from Spain, their ships, moved only by winds in the sails, wouldn't be able to take them back home. But Christopher Columbus didn't turn back. He knew there were no monsters, and that the winds would blow them back if they first sailed to the north. Just when everyone else was about to give up hope, land was sighted. Columbus thought he had reached Asia, but he had really come upon an island, one in a group of islands we now call the Bahamas. There, friendly natives, whom he called Indians, greeted him and his sailors. When Columbus returned to Spain, he was welcomed as a hero. Almost everybody thought he had found a way to Asia by sailing west. After Columbus made his voyage, other explorers from different countries began exploring and settling the lands across the ocean. In time, new countries and new ways of living were started on these lands. Things that might not have happened had not Christopher Columbus been so brave, so patient, and so willing to stick to his beliefs. And that's why we celebrate Columbus Day every October, to honor the courage and patience of that great explorer. Parades are held on Columbus Day in many places throughout the country. And, as you can easily imagine, speeches about courage and patience are often given. Some time ago, a special celebration was held in a town named after the adventurer, Columbus, Wisconsin. 500 days before the 500th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's historic journey, the citizens of that small town watched as children and grown-ups marched down the streets, carrying flags and flowers and playing music. One of the people in the parade was Christopher Columbus himself, or at least a person who pretends to be the famous explorer. His real name is Joseph Lawfer, a college professor who travels all around the country giving speeches about the life and times of Christopher Columbus. He talks to adults and children. He often tells them little-known and interesting facts about Columbus, including the new foods that were found on his journey.
One of the most unusual foods was this. We in Europe had never seen a pineapple, right? And you know what another important food was that we brought back? Anyone know what this is? What kind of potato? A sweet potato, okay? Very important for European diet after I came back. And of course, the most important of all foods was corn. Yes, we got that from the Indians. And you know, we weren't good to the Indians. I wasn't good to the Indians. The Spanish who were with me weren't good to the Indians. We enslaved some of them. And so Native Americans aren't too happy with me. And I say, what we did then was what everybody did back then. That doesn't mean it was right. But if we were back today, we wouldn't do it that way. Okay.
The biggest event during the two-day celebration was a ride in 3 huge hot air balloons, specially named for the occasion as, that's right, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, and the Niña. Once the balloons were filled with hot air, up they went with their passengers. And they sailed across the skies, like Columbus and his sailors sailed the ocean. Of course, not everyone can celebrate the brave deeds of Christopher Columbus by riding in a hot air balloon across the countryside, or even by building a model of one of his ships. But each of us can celebrate by remembering his bravery, his patience, his skill as one of the greatest sailors of all time, and his strength of character, never giving up, even when others didn't think he was right. Sailing across the ocean in 1492 was a great achievement, and it couldn't have been done without a great person, like Christopher Columbus leading the way. Christopher Columbus was born in A. Chicago, Illinois, B. Genoa, Italy, C. Lisbon, Portugal. True or false? Christopher Columbus was a ship carpenter. Who was Diego Columbus? The King of Portugal wouldn't give Columbus money for a voyage because A. His advisors said the ocean was too large to reach China. B. He needed the money to buy guns and tents for his soldiers. C. He was too poor. Columbus finally received the money for his voyage from A. His wife's parents, B. Some priests in Spain, C. Isabella and Ferdinand. True or false? Columbus's 3 ships were the Pinta, Santa Maria, and Nisita. What things did the sailors on Columbus's ships fear? Christopher Columbus landed at A. An island in what is now known as the Bahamas, B. Plymouth Rock, C. New Amsterdam. Name 3 foods Columbus brought back to Europe. Christopher Columbus was A. Brave, impatient, strong. B. A very skillful sailor who was patient and brave. C. Very kind to the Indians on the Bahama Islands.